Thank you for inviting me, and very welcome to you on this important subject. And I'm hoping that we'll generate some new insights from our conversation and maybe even have some fun along the way, right? So let us begin. So today we're going to look to try and understand D&I from a coaching perspective. And a lot of this is driven by that coaching perspective, and we make no apologies for that. We'll observe some of the indicators around exclusivity and inclusivity, and we'll reflect on those challenges and perhaps even the levers of change that are open, not just to me, but to us as a group of people who care about perhaps the culture that we have in our organizations and our communities. And those insights around what does it really mean when a collaborative exercise like this, where we start to generate insights that means and leads to a more inclusive and more sense of belonging in the organizations and the communities we belong to. So I'll give you a couple of minutes on my story and why this is important for me. And as a certified coach with the Coaching Federation, when I started to write this little bit of a bio, I realized way before then, on all of the corporate assignments I had, coach approach, a coaching mindset was always the primary of how I managed to get results in assignments. And what was interesting was the diversity of locations, from Dublin to Dubai, from Edinburgh to Hyderabad, Arizona to Africa. There was always this sense of, with that much diversity, how would I need to show up in order to create an impact? And the diversity didn't stop there, because there are many different sectors within those different regions, from banking to legal to marketing to professional services to IT. So we've got a lot of different lenses in which we have to engage. And what I found was there were some core principles that underpinned everything I did. And those principles are not really hard to understand, and I'm hoping they resonate with you. And the first was, meet the client where they are, not as you would like them to be, not as you'd hope them to be, but in situ where they are, with however they show up. The second one was seeking to understand before being understood, and doing it in such a way that they feel acknowledged, they feel considered. And then the third one, and this was above all else, look at the human being in front of me, was my primary goal. Not the title, not the job, not the problem statement, not the piece of business we were trying to win, but look at the human being in front of me first. What is the situation they have found themselves in? And what can we do collaboratively to make a difference? And those three principles have all been in service of this notion of trying to turn an obstacle into an opportunity and doing it collaboratively. And I was reminded by one of my African friends of a lovely little saying, which was, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. And that sense of collaborative endeavor, that has never left me. And I'm hoping it invites you to think about, who are you collaborating with? What's your collaborative endeavor on this important subject? The pandemic is one of those things we can't ignore, because it provided obstacles and real hardships for us all. And that was to be seen in many different ways, and not least within organizations, as they had to find ways of actually addressing what it means to have a diverse organization now split, not only on-prem, but with hybrid working being a very real consideration, what that would mean. And one of the things that I found most interesting was, what is the definition of diversity, equity, and inclusion? What could that definition look like in the space of this new era where new considerations are being given and people are expecting different things from their organizations? So let's just visit that now in terms of what that opportunity could look like. So one of the things about looking for the opportunity from the obstacle, we can now start to think about what are some of those obstacles that we now had to face as a result of the pandemic, as a result of this reconsideration of what's important for the individuals that the organization is most dependent upon. And what might those obstacles look like? And those obstacles included terminology that didn't exist pre-pandemic. And one of those terminologies is depicted in this picture, where what are you noticing from this picture right now? What is your sense of what is going on for those individuals? What if this was your team? What if this was your colleagues? And one of the things that came into organizational consideration was this notion of quiet quitting. And this is where these employees are filling a seat and watching the clock. They put the minimum of effort required, and they are psychologically disconnected from their employer. Although they are minimally productive, they are more likely to be stressed and burnt out than engaged workers, because they feel lost and disconnected from that workplace. And this came from a Gallup poll done in 2023, looking backwards at 2022. Now, what's also interesting is, what is the questions it prompts in you? What are the feelings that are going on you when you observe this in another human being? And then ask yourself about your role as a leader, as a professional, as a team leader, as an executive, as a parent, as a mother. It really doesn't matter, because there is something about when we look at the human being in front of us. Remember the principle I started with at the first. When we look at the principle in front of us, what do we notice and what don't we notice? What was interesting about this, if we just take that one step further, and let's just compare and contrast. Of those who are thought to be thriving, and this is a world view, we've broken down regionally by country, but I'm giving you the world data. 23% were considered to be thriving. This middle group here, this disconnected, disengaged, this was 59% under this banner heading of quiet quitting. And then the further 18% was loud quitting, where these individuals would not only leave the organization, but they would be very vocal about it. They would be very active on social media to let people know exactly what it was like for this organization and what they felt as their experience. And it's so important when you consider, right now it's never been easier to pass around information and to exchange ideas and views. So how important might it be that we take a census check for ourselves? What is really going on? And we expend that, if we extend that inquiry, what are you noticing now? What's occurring to you with this concept that I believe I understand those working around me, but what I'm also aware of what I don't know about what's going on around me? And for the individuals that we lead, our peer group, what are we actually doing differently or the same pre and post pandemic? Because with a heightened sense of awareness, there is an opportunity, because all change, no matter what change it is, begins with this heightened sense of awareness. But how are you igniting that awareness in you? What is your field of interested inquiry for those that you hold dearest, for those that you are dependent upon, for those that you're leading, for those that you want to make a difference for, but you might not be sure what's actually going on compared to what you're seeing? And this is where we start to do the dance of what can we do about that? What can we make that heightened sense of awareness mean? So when we think about inclusive leader as a term that's now also in organizational language, what are the elements of an inclusive leader that would be supported by a coaching mindset? Because that's what our discussion is about today. it's about trying to find a way to not only do what we've always done, but know we've moved into a different area of our thinking because we are trying to do different things. And what might those different things be? Intent, that intentionality, that conscious awareness that I know what I don't know because I am constantly looking to find out more about the situation. I am taking it as for granted that the individuals I have around me, there are far more to them than just what I can see with my naked eye. I'm intentional about that conscious awareness of what I don't know to serve what I could find out. Courage is one of those terms that has been around since time immemorial, but it's such a difficult quality to define, and it's such a difficult quality to understand in yourself. And being prepared to have difficult conversations is part of this journey. And when I go into organizations, one of the first conversations we have, what are we prepared to do for what it is we say we want? And how are those two things aligned? Because I can tell you this, if there's one constant about change, just to quote the old adage, it will meet resistance. It will meet an equal and opposite force to say, why don't we do what we've always done? And that courage is something you find in the moment when it's you standing up for what you believe in front of those who might believe different things, which they're entitled to do, but you dare greatly anyway. You have the courage of your convictions. Dedicated to making a difference. And it's that committed to look at the change required from all perspectives to produce measurable outcomes. And we start to see where what we're able to create when we join up with those multiple perspectives. Because remember, diversity, if anything, is a descriptor of difference. It suggests that there are many different ways of looking at the same subject. And how might an inclusive leader take that to be one of the qualities that not only do they look for in themselves, but they look for in those that they would call their leadership team, and prepared to have that commitment to have all of the perspectives considered in order to produce measurable outcomes that suggest that we not only know where we started, we have an idea of where we want to go, but we're prepared to hold ourselves accountable for the steps in between. And this is where you start to see those three qualities: intentionality, courage, and dedication, producing quite three distinct leadership traits. Let's just take that a step further. Consciously curious. That curiosity to say, I'm leveraging the power of diverse perspectives as an everyday opportunity. I'm consciously curious. And that curiosity is what's producing insight, helping me to answer some of the challenges that we don't even have a statement for, but we know we have that ability to inquire, and inquire in such a way to produce very different outcomes. Take it further. This cultural intelligence with over 8 billion people on the planet right now, How are we training our organizations? How are we leading our teams? How are we informing our peer groups? To be minded that we all accept we have a multiple global environment in which to trade goods and products and services. Those environments come with people from all different backgrounds and ways of being. How are we consciously making it our business to be culturally intelligent about what those differences might mean? And what might it mean for assumptions we've been making about how we do business previously? What might this new awakening, this heightened sense of awareness post-pandemic, what might that open the door to as cultural intelligence? Imagine this if it was one of the leadership qualities for your leadership team. Ask questions that you don't have a ready-made answer, but you're prepared to ask the question. And when I think about collaboration and connectiveness and connection, and I remember that phrase, if you want to go fast, go alone, and far, go with others. All my career, I have been blessed to have that collaborative community around me in order to provide those blind spots that we all carry. But you don't have to carry those blind spots alone. When you are collaborating with those around you in order to find the nuances of the different perspectives that exist in each and every pocket of our society. And that gives us a picture of what's possible. That gives us a sense of the glue to all of this is that sense of collaboration and connection. Let's go one step further. Let's look at it reverse. Let's look at it. What happens when you have a coaching mindset? And you don't have to be a coach to have a coaching mindset. But what are the qualities that would serve you when you're supported by an inclusive leader and you as an individual have taken responsibility to adopt a coaching mindset in order to make sense of the challenges you're facing in your sphere of influence? What might those qualities be? Psychological safety, the foundation stone of understanding and being understood. That whole notion of challenge and care, because it does take courage. Yeah? Whilst you're intentional about your psychological safety and making other people feel safe, in order to hold that space, be vulnerable, have a degree of challenge, have a degree of care, and do that heady dance, pushing the envelope of what's possible based on that trust. Often when change is considered, it's always considered about somebody else or something else needing to change, quite often. But sometimes change begins from within, and working on the inner game, working on the human being of you, means you are preparing yourself for not only being vulnerable to say what I don't know, you're preparing yourself to say, this is what I'm prepared to do about it. Because if it starts with awareness, the thing that follows next is, what are you prepared to do about the things you've now noticed? And working on that inner game is that dedication to the cause that you believe in the future you would see made real. When you're consciously curious and take that boundless curiosity, leveraging the power of diverse perspectives and every opportunity becomes as natural as walking, because you're prepared to ask questions in service of each of us getting a better understanding of the problems we're facing. And we open ourselves up to ideas that have never yet had light put on them. But boundless curiosity being a quality that we all lean into, as the challenges are different and different in nature, the opportunities created by the quality of the curiosity and the questions it leads to. Practical empathy in holding a space that's transformative by design means, as one human being to another, we're able to empathize with what they may be going through, what that person in front of you is going through, what that team may be going through. But you're prepared to be objective in working out how could you make a difference. And in making that difference, you are not only contributing to the experience of another, you're starting to make changes which will be felt not only around them, but around everybody else that they contact and everybody else they exchange views with, because your leadership, using a mindset that is not just about what you want to have happen, but it's you in service of allowing others to produce the type of results that they know they can. They just need people to understand what they're going through right now. And as we start to produce the empowering relationships, which underpins everything we do, whether it be in our communities, whether it be in our families, whether it be in our organization. Empowering relations, that co-creation of transformative relations, which are based on trust, challenge, and care, working on oneself with boundless curiosity, practical empathy. This is what's possible from a coaching mindset inside of individuals who are so minded to want to do this exploration, wanting to do this in a game. And when I start to think about what that video represented earlier and the biases that were coming out from the experience of each of those individuals, one of the reasons why the invitation is put to develop that coaching mindset are that we carry biases as human beings. That's just a fact. But how might we address these typical type of biases that we saw in the video? How might we address those if we do adopt a coaching mindset, if we do strive to become inclusive leaders, if we do work on the inner game as well as the outer conditions? And trying to combine all of that together is almost a quest. It's an endeavor. It's daring greatly. It's being prepared to have courage. It has intentionality. It means we are curious. It means we are collaborative. All of these things combined is a lever of change that is not outside of us, because I believe that power of change is in each of us. And if we start to think about what that actually means, well, then it just says itself. It starts with me. We're having this conversation, and I take ownership of trying to impart insight and encouraging future conversation. It starts with you in terms of what will you do differently? What one thing, what one little sliver will you use to start to think about the things that you care about and think differently? And together, the invitation is This is the beginning of a conversation, not the end. This is the opportunity to turn those obstacles, turn them completely 360. This is the moment where we actually decide we want to make a difference. That was a whistle-stop tour of some of the things that I hope, and I know we hope at Coaching Focus, will generate further questions and answers, but also will generate further inquiry as to what can you do to make a difference from where you are. I'm going to stop sharing now. And I'm going to invite any questions.
First one I've got was saying, I love the language you're using. It builds inclusion. How are coaching programs embracing this?
Why that question's so interesting is because there is no one size fits all here. And it's not the intent to even think it could. But one of the things I think there is a heightened sense of consciousness that we as coaches are in a box seat. We are in a position to actually ask different questions and perhaps the questions we've asked before. And for many of the coaching conversations I have, that expanded sense of inquiry is one of the positive benefits of the post-pandemic era, forcing us to ask different questions as we hold people in spaces that perhaps they haven't been in before. So I think it's definitely something which I'm seeing far more of than I did even 2 years ago, with the catalyst of all the changes that we've all experienced during the last 3 years. What else?
Okay, I've got another one, Martin. If everyone today was to leave remembering one thing to do differently, what would it be?
The inner game. To embrace a coaching mindset, starting with the inner game, which means you accept responsibility for what you don't know, and you're prepared to act greatly in filling that gap, because that inner work will produce outward results. It will start to look at the things that perhaps you haven't looked at before in a different way. And I work on the inner game most days. What don't I know about this situation I'm now in? Got somebody with a raised hand. Please, Opaline.
Not sure that they can speak, but I've got another question that's come up a couple of times, which is how would I approach my boss about making my team more diverse?
It starts with intent. So the second follow-on to the question would be, what is your intention for your team? And if that intent is clearly defined in language that is understood by the organization, then you're starting to talk about things that could be understood, but it has that extra flavor of your intent, because you have a vision for your team that they may not even have for themselves. But that notion of challenge and care, but you care enough to challenge the fact that we're not perhaps where we could be, and that there's possibly more that could be done. So that invitation always starts with, what is your intent? And how might you explain that intent in language that the organization you're in can make sense of? I hope that's useful.
Great. I've got another one. How is this approach affecting the coaching models we use and train others in?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was on a webinar recently, and one of the things that occurred to me was what I was taking for granted. So let me just talk about my inner game. What I was taking for granted was, if I see the human being first, everything else follows second. Because in that initial contact, one human to another, and that getting to that place of vulnerability-based trust, so much more becomes possible. And the models and everything else that we have are great. But we also have an opportunity to connect as human beings in order to discover what's really going on beneath the surface. That's why that iceberg metaphor is so important. And I found in my experience, it's the little things about noticing others that allows them to tell you more than perhaps you've ever heard them say before. By noticing who they are, and they'll tell you who they want to become. What else you got for me?
You might have touched on this one a little bit already, but what one small step could someone take to start applying coaching mindset?
Begins with awareness. It's quickly followed by knowledge and capability. And some of the conversations that you can have with a coach in asking, what is it you're trying to do differently? And how might you go about that? And there are several practice groups. And I know that many of the coaching organizations offer practice groups. I go to practice groups on different models to keep learning about different ways to engage with human beings. So there's this thing about lifelong learning. And again, I take that for granted because I always do it. But I would suggest that first and foremost, you reach out to somebody inside a coaching paradigm, whether it be an organization like Coaching Focus or all the others, but you start a conversation to just elaborate what you actually know right now and what you would like to know. What's your field of inquiry? Is it around you're noticing something about your team? Is it something you're noticing about yourself? Is it something you're noticing about you wanting to go to an exposition, but you're not sure how to get there? So whatever your field of inquiry is, there are so many avenues now, there are too many to count. But it starts with the first step, reach out to the trusted source or somebody you know who knows a trusted source and just start a conversation. And you'll be surprised where your intent will lead just by having that, the courage to just go and find a trusted source in your organization or outside your organization to begin the conversation. What else you got?
How can we support people in majority groups to be open to thinking differently?
It's a great question. But the answer is not an easy one. What I found when I was working in a company a couple of weeks ago, the difference that got the conversation started, I had about 50 people in a room. The difference that got the conversation started was when the first person was willing to be vulnerable, but they're nervous about being a leader over a diverse group of individuals, and they were very nervous about getting it wrong. And that opened the floodgates to a really interesting conversation because they were prepared to say what they did not know. And in that vulnerability, the colleagues on their left and their right had ideas and insight that they shared, which then created another conversation. So the first thing is about having the courage to be vulnerable. What else you got?
think this might be our last one, but if I've missed any, feel free to post it. What about those who are automatically defensive on this subject? For example, I include everybody. How does this impact the inner game conversation?
It's acknowledgement. Because once I acknowledge the fact that the difficulty around trying to create cultural change, any change comes with resistance, fact. But that resistance doesn't mean to be a negative. It's a genuine concern from another human being that from wherever they are, this is how they see the world. And remember one of those principles we started with, meet the individual where they are, not where you would like them to be. But something's really interesting. Once I acknowledge that the considerations that another human being has on this topic or any other topic, in acknowledging they have every right to have an opinion which is different to mine. But the follow-up question, so what do you want in terms of a culture that everybody feels they belong? How would you design it from where you are right now? And once you start dialogue, something magical happens. You get into a conversation about opposites and obstacles, but underneath those is the opportunity to engage. And that collaboration, you have no idea where it will lead, but it starts with accepting somebody for where they are and then having a conversation regardless, which takes courage. And this is no easy feat, by the way. I'm not underestimating the difficulty others are having in organizations right now, having these difficult conversations. What else have we got?
There's no follow-up questions, but just a comment which I'll share with you, Martin, in case you want to reflect on it.
Yeah.
It says, I would also show data that this is the reality, sorry. It's not a personal attack, but something that needs to be addressed fully. Then share some examples so you can speak to the human in them.
Hey, love that. Thank you. You'll send me these, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, love that. Thank you very much. It's a great one. Any others?
Not as of now, but people are saying thank you and great webinar and so on. So thank you very much, everyone, for your comments and your questions.
Yeah. As always, it's a privilege to get anybody to share ideas, thoughts, and spend their time. So thank you all for making the time for our conversation today, and let it continue well after this session's over.